In this video, we're reviewing The Bride and taking a walk down the aisle with a coffee and slightly fruited cocktail called the Reinvigorator. Today, on the Martini Shot. Hello and welcome to the Martini Shot, the home of movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails. Before we get into the review, let's whip ourselves up a drink. Sometimes we need a little jolt to get us up and moving, whether it be because we're tired or we just had our neck snap. That was my idea for the Reinvigorator, but I also wanted it to have the aesthetic of the titular bride. So this will be a dark coffee cocktail that will combine with a little fruit and a big head of whipped cream to mimic the bride's crazy hair. But this is definitely a drink for the living, so mind the Wu-Tang Clan and let's get into it. This will be a shaken cocktail, so go ahead and grab yourself a cocktail shaker. First, we're gonna be starting with a couple fresh blueberries. I used anywhere between 8 and 10 for mine. And then you can follow that up with half an ounce of lemon juice and half an ounce of simple syrup. Now for our alcoholic ingredients, first we're gonna be adding a little bit of coffee liqueur at 1 ounce. And 2 ounces of a dark rum. And the final ingredient is more of an aesthetic one, not exactly required, but we're gonna be using a little bit of black sugar to give the drink the black shiny complexion we're looking for. Definitely not a requirement, but if you have it, go ahead and throw a pinch in there. All right, go ahead and throw some ice in your shaker and shake to chill. Once you're done, you're gonna wanna double strain that into a cocktail glass just to make sure you're getting all of that blueberry pulp out. And once that's done, go ahead and top it up with a nice swirl of whipped cream. Throw a straw in there, and now you have the Reinvigorator. Has a very nice balance between the coffee notes and the fruit notes. As you may know from watching this channel, I'm not a huge coffee person, so I like the coffee flavor to be there, but a little less strong than something like, say, an espresso martini. And I think this cuts it pretty well. The blueberry definitely comes through, it's nice and juicy, and that lemon juice also helps to brighten it up a little bit more as well. And while the whipped cream is mostly there just for decoration, it does help to sweeten it up as it starts to melt into the cocktail, kind of transforming it from just a cocktail into more of a dessert treat. This definitely turned out to be a great little experiment, and I didn't even have to defile any graves this time. Now that we have our drink, let's get right into the review of The Bride. Ugh. You know, I was pulling for this one. I think Maggie Gyllenhaal has shown some competency as a director with The Last Daughter from a few years back. I'm a big Jessie Buckley fan, a big Christian Bale fan, and a big fan of movies that just say "fuck you" and go balls to the wall mad. That's what I anticipated The Bride to be based on the trailers. And believe it or not, it was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. A Bonnie and Clyde style story with 2 of the most famous movie monsters of all time? Right here, please. But this is not that. In fact, I don't really know what this is. All I know is that I didn't really like it, and that makes me sad. The Bride is a scattershot of ideas and reimaginings that never truly came together to make something truly provocative or at the very least entertaining. Terrific actors like Buckley and Bale are forced to combat with a script that acts like it has so much to say, but never intends on being totally coherent with its intentions. It's certainly not boring, thanks in part to an admittedly fun visual style, but I can't say I was really enjoying my time with it either. And the thing is, this had full range to do what it wanted with the established characters and history of the novel, and yet its perceived reflections of Mary Shelley's work not only feels misused, but also just plain wrong. There's something of substance here, but it gets buried under too many baffling decisions that ultimately drown this film. There might be more to unearth from it, but at this point, you're better off just leaving it at the altar. Set in the 1930s, a woman named Ida is killed by the mob when she tries to make the boss's crimes known. She ends up being revived by Frankenstein's monster and a local scientist in order to give the monster the companionship he never had for over a century. Bonded by their undead physiology and their shunning from society, the two embark on a destructive spree across the country, intent on living the life they were never meant to have. I think the thing about this that hurt the most was seeing Jessie Buckley in a truly bad role. I don't think Buckley is entirely to blame, as I truly believe she was handed a role that was designed not to work. Buckley actually plays 2 characters, the titular bride and the ghost of Mary Shelley. Yes, the spirit of the author of Frankenstein possesses her in order to, in her words, create the sequel to her novel she was never able to make. What that essentially entails is Buckley portraying someone with a split personality, and one of those personalities only wants to speak like they have a case of mid-Atlantic Tourette's. When Buckley is allowed to just be the bride, I actually think her performance is quite good, tapping into the rage of being unheard and being an afterthought. It's these interjections from Mary Shelley that not only becomes grating on the ears, but her delivery is sometimes borderline incomprehensible. This really muddies what her intentions are, and what I gathered is kind of questionable. Shelley essentially is made out to be this witch that gets a woman killed so she can essentially turn her into a monster. Not only does this just feel like weak characterization, it also acts like it's giving Shelley agency over the legacy of Frankenstein. I could see that being an interesting idea if it went a certain way, but it just reads like a misunderstanding of Shelley's work as a whole, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Christian Bale comes out a little cleaner in this, but not by much. No surprise here, but Bale really nails the physicality of a role like this. He's obviously drawing a lot from Boris Karloff, hell, even a little bit of Peter Boyle. I do feel like we don't get nearly enough of the inner workings of his intentions. We know he's lonely and wants a bride, but we don't really go too much deeper into that. Does he want a bride truly because he's looking for love, or because he feels he's entitled to it, as many men believed back in that era? These kind of things would have added a bit more layers to him, but the film struggles to truly characterize him outside of the typical ostracizing you'd expect from a Frankenstein film. He's lying to Buckley's character, convincing her she was engaged to him before her death, and the film doesn't really do enough to villainize him or even generate some moderate sympathy for him. It makes an otherwise complex relationship just feel half-baked at the end of the day. He does nearly die if he doesn't go to the movies enough, so can't say he's not relatable. And that's a bit of a trend with this movie. It presents ideas that it only seems to go halfway on. Like I said before, the whole Mary Shelley thing doesn't really seem to have a lot of depth to it, but it does seem to feed into this feminist, empowering narrative that lurks in the background of this film. There's a point where this thing legit becomes Joker as women around the city rise up, painted as the bride to do something. This idea gets presented, and that has practically no impact on the rest of the story. We don't see the city change or even really understand what the movement means to others. Perhaps the strongest thematic element to this film revolves around Frank, who has an obsession with cinema. He uses it as a guiding light to frame his expectations for life without realizing it's a romanticized reflection of it itself. A great idea, but one that doesn't always feel like it's adding more depth to the character than it thinks. Ironically enough, this thing often feels like a stitched together hodgepodge of ideas, which I guess makes it authentically Frankenstein. I will say that this thing is presented in the kind of chaotic slapshot way that I really appreciate. In a film of big swings, the visuals are perhaps the element that pays off the most. There's a lot of interesting choices in colors and framing here that's really splendid, really capturing a gothic noir aesthetic that's a lot of fun to see at times. It's aggressive and a bit sloppy, but I think it fits right at home with what the film is trying to present. Now, if only the script could have done the same. I'll give it credit. There are some interesting ideas, concepts, and recontextualizations of the original novel that makes this thing far from being pointless or without merit. But intention is not the same as execution. The way it approaches some of these themes feels incredibly underdeveloped. The movement the bride ignites amongst scorned women is an afterthought for most of the movie. The side plot revolving around two detectives hunting down the monsters is boring and grinds the film to a halt whenever it cuts to them. This worked best when it was a silly, slightly poignant monster movie romp. The dance number and the citizens of Chicago literally chasing the monsters with pitchforks and torches is goofy, but that might have been what the movie needed more of, especially with how weak the feminist narrative turns out to be. And that's what kind of bugged me the most. This film almost kind of frames the story around Frankenstein finally getting a woman's voice behind it, seemingly forgetting it was written by a woman. The text of the original Frankenstein is incredibly feminist in how it portrays creating and nurturing life, and I don't think it necessarily needed Mary Shelley returning from the dead to reclaim the narrative. Maybe this was trying to bring those feminist elements of the story back into the forefront, but this just wasn't the way to do it in my eyes. While The Bride is bold in execution, the final result ends up being a stylish but rather empty take on the classic monsters. Things like the character of the bride and the weak, surface-level approaches to female struggles keeps this from being the quirky genre film it was probably meant to be. Never thought I'd be saying these words, but So no Lisa Frankenstein. Even still, this is far from the worst thing ever, as some people online have already labeled it. Believe it or not, I want more movies like this. I'd rather a bold attempt crash and burn than have a corporately produced piece of content give you everything you think you want. Men make confusing, baffling misfires all the time, and it's only fair that women get in on the fun as well. For my rating, I'm giving this film 2 black goo splatters out of 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Martini Shot. If you saw The Bride, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. And if you like what you saw here and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me across all social media channels. Those links are down in the description below. And if you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.